We've got time for a couple of questions from the audience. Does anyone want to ask a question of the panel? Or I'm going to carry on asking questions if not.
Well, if you've got any ideas for an app,
yeah.
we can chat about it.
We'll give you a quote. We'll give you a quote right now.
And a revenue share.
Just remember, no one ever got fired for hiring Ogilvy.
So, staying on the cost question, how much does it cost? And you know, apps, sites, all the different platforms. Where do I start? How much money do I need to have? Who's going to do the best price?
Well, I just wanted to say again, there is a huge challenge out there, right? So we know that there's the old Nokia platforms, there's the Android platforms, there's BlackBerry, there's iPhone, there's a whole bunch of platforms out there. And at some point, somebody's going to ask you the question, which platform should I be supporting? I wish we could tell you that if you were to sort of segment your audience down, you'd find out that your audience were 18 to 24-year-old males in London, they love sports, and 99% of them have got an iPhone, therefore put all your money into the iPhone, job done. That's never going to happen. The platforms are diversifying more and more. I think just to get back to the whole sort of what is it that you're trying to achieve, and I think if you start off at that point, if you're trying to do something that's innovative, if you're trying to do something that creates buzz, there are a couple of really shortcuts. Simply having an application in an app store, and I'm not saying it's the right approach, but simply having an application in an app store creates more buzz than having a mobile web. I mean, look at the last dinner party we went to a couple of months ago. Did somebody come to you and go, oh, look at this cool website I discovered? It's not like that. It's not how people talk. It's, wow, check out this cool app. People are still sort of holding up their phones, and that the icons on their desktop of their phone and the apps, it's saying something about who they are and what they think is cool. You know, it's sports app, it's rugby. No, it's not rugby, it's football. No, it's not football, it's hockey. So it's all about trying to figure out what's going to tick the box of your audience, and then obviously trying to align that with your budget. And at some point, you're going to have to make a tough make a tough decision. Just like 10 years ago, we had to decide on the browser wars, are we going to build a website that's compatible for Internet Explorer and Firefox and Navigate and Opera or whatnot? And eventually, you need to decide what's best for you and your audience, and then go with it and try and make that, whatever you do, as impactful as possible with the budget that you have. The other point is, don't do it in isolation. The digital mix is huge. You shouldn't be trying to segment. You shouldn't have an app strategy. Neither should you have a mobile web strategy. It should be part of something bigger, whether you call it your digital strategy or your integrated strategy or your social media strategy. Doesn't really matter, but make sure that there's a user journey that is actually amplifying whatever it is you're trying to achieve with the app or with the mobile web.
Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I think looking at sort of the costs and so on, I mean, obviously, as Hugh says, if you add another platform, you can't just port, because they are quite different in the way that they work. But I think generally speaking, it depends on what sort of content you actually want to put inside the app. So at the one end, if you want to put a really high-end piece of 3D modeling in there on the end of, say, image recognition to create an AR-type experience, that's going to cost you across 2 platforms somewhere in the region of 100, 120 grand if you want to do that at the kind of levels of the sorts of brands that we are talking about here would expect their consumers to get, i.e. not be critical of the fact that it wasn't a good app. But equally, if you're putting out stuff like copy, video, more sort of flattish type of content, you can easily get a cross-platform app for under £30,000. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve. What is worth pointing out is that those cheaper end apps, where you can go to companies that will basically write and then port across various different platforms, is that essentially the lower end stuff is exactly the kind of content that you should seriously consider using the mobile web for, because it doesn't necessarily need to have the richness, the processing, the sort of native aspects of an app. So equally, I know that there are apps out there that have cost 200, 250,000 quid. Once you start going on to iPad levels and you're trying to develop for things like retina screens, then you can't afford to do anything shoddy, and the prices go up accordingly. So it's really a content-based thing which decides whether or not an app's going to be cheap or expensive.
I mean, they just ventured onto iPads, and we talked about platforms that you can develop for apps or develop apps on, but what about devices? So, do you see apps being exactly the same on tablets, and we're seeing things like TV apps now as well, kind of quite new areas. But I mean, how big do you think apps could be on these different areas? Will we be having the same debate about web versus apps on different platforms?
So yeah, I think the way that kind of apps have found success is a really interesting thing, you know. So people have got used to that process of seeing an icon on the home screen, tapping it. I want Facebook, tap it, get it out. I want LinkedIn, tap it. And that kind of visual navigation, I think it's really intuitive. People respond to it. We were just chatting at lunch, you know, kind of 3-4-year-olds now can use iPads before they can tie their shoelaces, you know. And it's kind of that kind of intuitive interaction is something that I think that the web will start to learn you see sort of Chrome apps now in the browser. You'll see connected TVs, like Google are putting their Android OS into a telly. I can't remember which manufacturer. One of them they've put Android into. But you're starting to see that more and more in that process. And as a developer, as an agency, what we care about in terms of the technology build is like, what's the operating system? So if it's an Android tablet versus an Android phone, the technology and the team and the people behind it are the same. The same with if it's an iPhone or an iPad tablet, again, the teams are the same. So the question starts to become around the content. So it's the usability, how do you do the navigation, what's the design like? You know, think you're probably going to have a similar sort of set of code, so your code might be shareable across tablet and handset, but then you might need another design for bigger sort of touch points for your fingers and that sort of stuff. So it starts to become, you know, really interesting, just how many channels can I push this content out onto, and how is it going to be handled differently. So you know, you're starting to see real adoption of things like second screen devices. So I don't know if anyone's seen this app called ZBox. It's a really interesting kind of companion thing. You're watching TV, it knows what you're watching, it'll serve up rich content about the TV, it'll have a column of ads down the side. Really, really powerful channel for retail and marketers. And it's just these new ways of consumers interacting with their devices and multiple devices at the same time that start to become important. And then how do we port our content or our services or our products onto those devices?
I think you touched on something really interesting there, and that's the notion of usefulness. And it's only really people like us who talk about mobile and apps and the mobile internet in this way. I remember last February at 7:15 on a Tuesday night, halfway through Emmerdale, Tesco ran an ad, not for carrots or potatoes, not for buy one get one free, but for their shopper app. And actually, if you look at that ad, they never once define the app by its innovation or its technology. They define it only by its usefulness. And also, moreover, if you look at the casting of the ad, there's like a guy who's about 45 buying Maltesers, carrying a bit too much timber, so probably shouldn't be buying the Maltesers. And there's a woman with a northern accent, which is unusual, you know, in this country to use non-southern accents for national advertising. And when the Tesco van delivers the groceries to the house, it's just a normal 2 up, 2 down house in Middle England. And you look at that and you think, well, look, this is someone normalizing the use of mobile technology and defining it only on its usefulness and its utility. You know, and it's interesting that the one thing we haven't really talked about in this discussion is behavior and shopper behavior and consumer behavior. And actually, I mean, I don't know, it was none of our agencies who made that ad, but it's a very, very clever ad at the way it sells the technology, because it's technology agnostic. It's all about usefulness.
One of the things that I'm hoping is that as we create apps or mobile websites for new platforms like tablets, or, you know, what I'm hoping is that we actually make the most of those platforms, because there's it would be a shame if all we did was just created websites for bigger screens, because it's not about that. The cool thing about tablets as smartphones is that they are mobile. You know, some people forget that. It's something that you can take around. It's not a stationary object on your desk. You can walk around. We can give people experiences utilizing the fact that they are mobile. You know, so I hope that when we all come to developing tablet-specific apps, that we make the most of it. It's not just creating another newsreader. Well, I've already got a laptop at home. I've got a desktop at work. What I want is an experience. If, let's say, you're a newspaper, give me an experience that's someone that's localized to me, or that's making the use of the fact that it is a mobile device, because that's what's going to make you stand out. I'm going to go, wow, this application or mobile web is different to the other one, which just feeds me news. You've given me something that's different. You've surprised me. You've engaged me, and therefore I respect you for it. So, you know, let's always make sure that we try and make the most of whatever that particular platform is.
I mean, I would actually argue that tablets are not mobile devices. I think something like the IAB have got some great stuff about this, and I think it's something like 86% of tablets never ever leave the house. So what they are actually is a replacement to laptops. What they actually are is a lay back on the sofa and do all of the stuff that you probably wouldn't use your smartphone for. It is the Z-Box stuff, it is the dual screening. And actually, the context of people using tablets and for therefore tablet apps is going to be hugely different from the sort of quick in and out functionality of a smartphone app. And I think that's going to be massive, particularly as I genuinely do believe that in massive percentage of households in 18 months, 2 years, the primary device for internet, social networking, email is going to be the tablet, touch screening, lying back on the sofa, boots up in, 20 seconds. The laptop is going to be sitting upstairs, ready for doing the tax returns, gathering dust. So I genuinely think that they are the consumer access point within the home for the future.